Welcome to Antarctica. 90 million years ago. Let's fast forward a little bit. Antarctica, a fat wad of land around the South Pole covering this many kilometers squared, big enough to be a continent, covered in a couple handfuls worth of ice, containing 70% of the world's freshwater, really high, really dry, stuffed full of gold, iron and hydrocarbon goop, and some of these guys, and that's it. Here come humans. While they are out killing everything, burning things, destroying a third of tree coverage, killing each other, and burning more things, what do they do with 10% of the planet? They trek it, build funny orange houses, shave 25 trillion tons of ice off of it from burning things, sprinkle it with microplastics because they're everywhere, and leave it alone. What if we didn't? Let's start with what Antarctica physically has to offer. Let's say the Antarctic Treaty was just lifted and Antarctica just became a country. Not only does it now own this enormous 14 million kilometers squared of land, it, by some miracle, chokes the title of largest country to Russia, falling about 3 million squared kilometers short. But importantly, as all coastal countries do, it now also owns 12 nautical miles of sea around itself and is able to exploit 200 nautical miles of sea stretching out from its land border. Antarctica now has access to about 6.7 million kilometers squared of ocean, which it can freely use for offshore fracking and large-scale fishing. Judging by the fact that this area is enormous and that it has not been overfished, Antarctica is now wiping its arse with dollar bills, and we're just getting started. Let's quickly summarize what else Antarctica physically has to offer. It has enormous freshwater stores, like the subglacial Lake Vostok, which is not only increasingly valuable, but may also be of help to Antarctic citizens living here. Antarctica also contains billions of tons of gold, iron, copper, nickel, and other useful metals, but they are so difficult to extract and of such miserable quality that mining these ores just doesn't seem to be profitable. It's also very similar geologically to countries with the biggest uranium reserves, like Australia, and is believed to harbour millions of tons of this stuff. Stick around for an interesting theoretical use for this uranium. And... oh yeah, and it's chock full of fossil fuel.
Here comes the money.
Drill, baby, drill.
As hinted by the intro, Antarctica used to be a prehistoric jungle during the Cretaceous period about 90 million years ago, since it was much closer to the equator. And as I've explained in another video, when all of this living matter dies, it is buried underground, and over millions of years of heat and pressure it turns into yummy hydrocarbon goop, like coal and oil. And keep in mind, this place was a jungle, so there's a lot of the stuff under Antarctica. Let's see the numbers. Coal can be found all over Antarctica, but the most promising reserves are in the Transantarctic Mountains. Estimated national reserves exceed 500 billion tons, which would give Antarctica the largest coal reserves of any country. And keep in mind that this number is a minimum estimate, and it could actually be holding potentially hundreds of billions of tons more than this. The only other country even close to comparability is the US, which holds just less than half this amount of coal, at 249 billion tons. Speak of the US, here they come, because in oil reserves, Antarctica boasts 29 million meters cubed of oil, for which it is humbly awarded the number 3 spot. These values are economically comparable to the Saudis, which famously are as wealthy as they are due to their immense oil reserves, suggesting someplace in Antarctica could become the next Dubai from oil money alone. And finally, on the topic of natural gas, Antarctica is concealing the flatulence of over 14 trillion cubic meters of gas, the fourth most in the world. Overall, by multiplying these assets by their current market values and adding them together, Antarctica holds an estimated 93 trillion USD of fossil fuels, enough to buy not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 186 billion Lego Death Stars. Compared to Saudi Arabia, Antarctica has over 4 times the valued fossil fuel reserves of the boot, which is only worth about 40.9 billion Death Stars. Or that much money. But of course, there are a number of catches. Most importantly, all of the resources I've discussed lie at least an extra 2 kilometers under Antarctica's surface due to the enormous ice sheet that covers the entire continent. This amount of distance would make extracting any underground asset incredibly difficult, and sometimes even borderline unprofitable. Also, the quantity of fossil fuel reserves I've discussed is purely speculation, since almost no studies have been conducted on Antarctic ice to accurately measure these amounts. So while there might be more fuel than we estimate, there also might be less. Second, thanks to climate change, the value of fossil fuel is expected to peak in only a few years before it will gradually decline thanks to developments in renewable energy and the decommissioning of most related power plants. And coal, the substance in which Antarctica is most rich in, will conveniently be the first fossil fuel to tank in price thanks to its incredibly high carbon emissions and heavy metal content. Additionally, I wrongfully used the original 2016 price of $500 per LEGO Death Star for my calculation, which has increased dramatically since the set was retired in 2020. I deeply apologize for this error, and I do not expect to be forgiven. All of these factors lead me to believe that Antarctic fossil fuel is probably not going to single-handedly turn it into the next Dubai. But it's not the end of the world, since Antarctica still has a lot to offer. Besides, what level of ignorant, miseducated degenerate would you have to be to endorse a shanty town built ground up off of lies, modern-day slavery, and the civil engineering, forward-thinking capacity of a goldfish? Anyway, let's segue into a more positive topic: research. Antarctica is like no place on Earth. While it might not offer much ecologically, the sheer difference between here and places more habitable on the planet makes it a very unique place to learn about. There's a reason research is the only human activity taking place in Antarctica today. Its ice also has an upside in the form of ice core drilling. The composition of ice tells us a lot about what Antarctica, as well as our entire planet, used to look like. In fact, the evidence for Antarctic rainforests, a topic I've already mentioned a number of times, was found in an ice core from Antarctica, which contained fossilized roots and spores evident of this type of climate. On the topic of fossils, they're also something to offer under the ice sheet. There could be hundreds, maybe thousands of species under Antarctica, some of them even alive. Take a look at this methane-eating little guy, who could literally help us fight climate change. On a global, or rather a cosmic scale, Antarctica has some more quirks. Since it's at the South Pole, it experiences less atmospheric interference, making it the perfect place to launch satellites and radars, not only useful for research, but for our next topic: Antarctic militarization. Antarctica has the best strategic positioning in the world. It is in the middle of nowhere and shares no land borders, making it the perfect naval superpower. An Antarctic navy would have dominant control over important choke points like the Drake Passage, as well as the entire southern hemisphere. During war, it could easily disrupt global trade and rule the southern seas. Nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers could prove incredibly effective at geopolitical coercion, almost as much as Antarctica's immense uranium reserves being used as a nuclear arsenal. These factors, combined with a possible army of 44 million penguins, a prosperous scientific community, and a fat wad of oil, could see a world dominated by a seemingly useless chunk of ice in the middle of nowhere. Except it probably wouldn't. Truth is that this militarization would either not work at all or start World War III, unless Trump and the thing that follows him around starts it before Antarctica does, in which case Antarctica will start World War IV. Let me explain. From the moment that Antarctica becomes a country, the entire world will understand the immense mineral and strategic value that it holds, as well as the threat posed by it, and act accordingly. Antarctica would immediately be manipulated to either support another global superpower, or it would be outright invaded in an effort to obtain its natural resources. If Antarctica became a country, the entire world would know better than to feed it a military, so a weaponized, indomitable penguin army is sadly something we will never see. But that's not all. There is so much else wrong with Antarctica that would hinder its success if it were to become a country. The obvious disadvantage of Antarctica is its conditions. It is almost completely uninhabitable for humans thanks to its average temperature of -57 degrees Celsius, meaning water cannot be found in liquid form on the surface. This consequently means that it is inhabitable for plants as well, meaning anyone living here would not have access to food, and the country would have to spend billions importing literally all of its food. Even if it were to develop laboratories dedicated to growing artificial food, this would not provide anywhere near enough for a larger population. It also has a very strange day-night cycle. Thanks to the Earth's tilt, the sun remains above the horizon for 6 months during summer, before setting for 6 months during winter. This surplus and deficit of sunlight throughout the year biologically affects the human circadian rhythm, affecting sleep patterns, hormones, and taking a significant toll on mental health, meaning Antarctica is genuinely a dangerous place to live mentally. So, we've established that a long-term stay, let alone residency, is a bad idea, completely ruling out the possibility of a permanent Antarctic population. But there is so much more that sucks here. In terms of infrastructure, Antarctica is better off with igloos. Antarctic infrastructure has to deal with harsh winds up to 200 miles per hour, permafrost, and frequent blizzards. Since solid ground is 2 kilometers below the ice sheet, house foundations are often given hydraulic legs and sometimes skis to account for the unstable ground. And when I mean unstable ground, I mean the accumulation of snow is such a large factor that many Antarctic buildings have to be physically moved to avoid snow suffocating the entire building. In conclusion, Antarctica would just not be powerful as a country. I mean, it has untapped resources too impractical to extract, the geography of a cartoon villain's lair, a climate, ecosystem and circadian cycle surprisingly hostile, literally like year-round nothing lives here. I mean, subscribe.